If you dance this waltz, you marry my son." Millionaire laughed. But Black Maid was dance champ. The chandeliers of the Manhattan ballroom glittered like frozen stars, but the spotlight fell on someone no one expected. Tasha Brooks, the woman in a cleaner's uniform. Preston Wells smirked, his voice slicing through the music as he raised a glass. "Since you're already on the floor, why don't you show us your moves?" he taunted, eyes glinting with cruel amusement. The crowd erupted in laughter, clinking, glasses exchanging whispers. They weren't laughing at Preston, they were laughing at her. Andre Bennett, his son, leaned back with a grin, entertained by the humiliation. Rebecca Lang, Preston's elegant wife, tilted her head and added mock sweetness. "Yes, darling, give us a performance. We'd love to see it." The words carried the sting of a command, not an invitation. Tasha's hands tightened around the edge of her cleaning cart. The air grew heavy as every eye in the room pinned her down, turning the polished marble floor into a stage of mockery. In the back, Jason Mendez, a quiet security guard, stood rigid. His gaze shifted from Tasha's trembling fingers to Preston's smug expression. Something about this didn't sit right with him. The room buzzed, waiting for her refusal. That was the game. Preston's cruel challenge wasn't about dancing. It was about breaking her spirit in front of an audience that lived for spectacle. But Tasha didn't flinch. Tasha Brooks did not move at first. The laughter rolled over her like thunder in a storm, yet her expression remained composed. "Preston." Wells leaned forward, expecting her to shrink away, to beg him to stop. Instead, she slowly lifted her gaze, and her calmness unsettled the room. "I accept," she said, her voice even, carrying across the marble floor like the strike of a bell. The ballroom erupted again, this time louder, sharper. Guests clapped, mockingly, cheering as though the evening had just gained a new form of entertainment. Someone called out, "This will be better than the orchestra." Another voice added, $10 she does not last 30 seconds. Laughter spilled into wagers. Crisp bills flashed in manicured hands. A circle began to form, polished shoes, scraping against marble as guests cleared the center of the floor. Tasha stood at the edge of that circle, the only figure not dressed in silk or velvet. The cleaner turned spectacle. Preston's grin widened. "You are braver than I thought, or perhaps foolish. Either way, this will be unforgettable." Rebecca Lang glided to her husband's side, sequins catching the light. "Why leave her alone?" she purred, eyes never leaving Tasha. "Perhaps she needs an example to follow." The guests roared with delight at the suggestion. Rebecca stepped gracefully into the circle, her gown flowing as she struck a poised stance. The room held its breath, eager to watch the contrast between a woman of privilege and a woman of labor. Tasha did not protest. She simply adjusted her footing, her chin lifting ever so slightly, as if she were no stranger to the weight of eyes upon her. Rebecca began first. Her movements were precise, practiced, designed for elegance rather than passion. She spun once, twice, a glittering showcase for the crowd. Applause followed, but it was laced with derision meant for Tasha. "Match that," Preston said, raising his voice so the whole room heard. The stakes had sharpened. If Tasha faltered, she would not only endure ridicule, but permanent disgrace. In this room of power and wealth, her dignity would be stripped away. Jason Mendez, standing rigid at the back, felt his jaw tighten. He had seen arrogance before, but this was cruelty dressed in luxury. His eyes followed Tasha closely. She was calm, too calm for someone about to be destroyed in front of hundreds. The bets piled higher. 50 on Rebecca. 100 says, "The cleaner cannot finish one spin." Money slapped onto tables, laughter echoing against crystal walls. Preston raised his glass, his confidence absolute. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to witness humility at its finest." But then something subtle shifted. Tasha took one step forward. not hurried, not hesitant, deliberate. Her hand brushed the edge of her uniform, smoothing the fabric as though she were donning a gown no one else could see. The whispers grew. A few guests leaned closer, suddenly curious. Rebecca narrowed her eyes, sensing that something unspoken was building. Tasha did not start with a flourish. She simply lifted her arms, her posture unfolding with a grace that did not belong to a cleaning woman. For a moment, the room forgot to laugh. Preston's smirk flickered, then returned. Forced this time. "Do not stop now," he taunted. "Show us what you believe you can do." Tasha's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, more like a secret, waiting to be revealed. The ballroom leaned in, breath caught in collective anticipation. Something was beginning, and for the first time, the outcome did not seem so certain. Rebecca Lang commanded the ballroom with practiced ease. Each step, each twirl, was executed with precision sharpened by years of private lessons. Her gown glittered like a constellation under the chandelier, her arms sweeping elegantly, as if the music itself bent to her will. The crowd responded instantly, bursting into applause that echoed off the marble walls. "Now that is grace," one guest declared, lifting a champagne flute. Others joined in, clapping with enthusiasm. But behind their admiration lingered something sharper, anticipation. For what came next, Preston Wells did not waste the opportunity. He raised his voice above the cheers, his smile gleaming with cruelty. "And now," he said, gesturing toward Tasha, "let us see if our little housemaid can rise above scrubbing floors and imitate even a fraction of my wife's talent." The laughter that followed struck like arrows, but Tasha remained still. Her calmness, her refusal to flinch, only irritated Preston further. Andre Bennett, standing not far from the circle, shifted uncomfortably. He had laughed earlier, caught in the current of the crowd, but now unease pressed against him. Something about the spectacle felt wrong. His eyes flickered between Preston's arrogance and Tasha's quiet composure, and a small voice inside him whispered that this game was about to turn. Jason Mendez, on the opposite side of the ballroom, leaned against a column, his arms folded. Unlike the others, his attention was not on Rebecca's performance, but on Tasha herself. He searched her face, her posture, her stillness, as if trying to uncover a hidden truth. Then a memory returned, a conversation overheard months ago in a quiet cafe, rumors whispered by a retired stagehand. There was a ballerina, the old man had said, once radiant, destined for greatness. Then, suddenly she vanished. No scandal, no farewell. She disappeared into silence, as if the stage had swallowed her whole. Jason's gaze sharpened. The way Tasha held herself, the balance in her stance, the quiet certainty, it did not belong to an amateur. The ballroom atmosphere thickened as Rebecca finished her routine with a final flawless spin. She bowed gracefully, her confidence radiating, as applause thundered through the hall. Guests shouted her name, clapping harder, praising her beauty and talent. Preston basked in the glow of his wife's triumph, then turned the spotlight back onto Tasha. "Well," he said, voice booming, "do not be shy. Show us what you can do, if anything at all." Phones appeared in polished hands, their cameras rising like a sea of judgment. Guests leaned forward, eager to capture humiliation in high definition. Murmurs spread quickly, feeding on excitement and cruelty. "Record this," someone whispered. "It will be priceless." "I bet she falls in the first step," another chuckled. The gossip swirled faster, words snapping like whips. Tasha stood surrounded not by guests, but by predators, circling for weakness. Rebecca, still glowing from applause, added fuel to the fire. "Do not keep them waiting, dear," she said smoothly, her eyes glittering with disdain. "Unless, of course, you wish to admit defeat before you begin." Tasha's gaze met Rebecca's, steady and unbroken. Then, without a word, she stepped into the center of the circle. The crowd hushed, eager for the fall. Andre exhaled, his nerves tightening. Something about this moment felt heavier than a simple jest. Jason's heart quickened. He could not shake the thought that what he was about to witness would not be the embarrassment Preston craved, but something unforgettable. The tension was now unbearable. Every eye locked on Tasha, every phone camera pointed, every whisper stilled into silence. Even the orchestra, sensing the gravity, held back their instruments. And in that silence, Tasha lifted her arms with the composure of someone who belonged not in shadows, but in the spotlight. The ballroom leaned forward, breathless. Something extraordinary was about to unfold. The room held its breath as Tasha stepped forward. She stood still for a moment, eyes closed, her hands floating in the air like feathers. The silence was deep, broken only by the faint hum of the chandelier lights. Then, with the grace of a whisper, she began to move. Her first step was soft, but full of control, her body turning with elegance that no beginner could fake. Her arms flowed like water, her balance perfect, her presence magnetic. It was not clumsy, not hesitant, it was art. The crowd froze. The cruel smirks faded. No. One laughed. No one whispered. Every eye locked on her, stunned into silence. Tasha spun across the marble floor with effortless precision, each twirl glowing with mastery. Her gown swirled in a river of silver and blue, catching the light in ways that seemed almost unreal. With every step, she painted the air with beauty, commanding the space as if she had always belonged there. Guests lowered their phones, forgetting to record. They simply watched, caught between disbelief and wonder. Rebecca's smile cracked. The confidence that had carried her moments ago was gone, replaced with a flicker of fear. Preston's grin stiffened, his jaw tightening. He had promised humiliation, but humiliation was now slipping toward him. Andre Bennett's heart pounded. He had seen dancers before, but this was something different. This was not talent hidden in a maid. This was mastery that could only come from years on the stage. He stepped forward, clapping slowly, his voice breaking the silence. "Beautiful," Andre said, loud enough for all to hear. "Truly beautiful." The words carried weight. Some guests joined, their hands clapping timidly at first, then stronger, as awe grew. The applause was no longer for Rebecca, it was for Tasha. Jason Mendez felt his memory spark again. The rumors, the whispers, the story of the ballerina who had vanished, it all connected. His eyes widened as realization dawned. "This is her," Jason murmured to himself. "It has to be her." And then it spread. Recognition, slow at first, then quick as fire. Whispers filled the edges of the ballroom. "I know her face." "Yes. Yes, I have seen her before. That spin, do you remember the posters? She was everywhere once." "It cannot be. She disappeared. Years ago." The puzzle pieces clicked, and suddenly the truth was undeniable. Tasha Brooks was not just a maid, not just a guest forced into mockery. She was the legendary ballerina who had vanished from the world stage without a word. The audience gasped, the weight of discovery crashing through them. What had begun as a cruel spectacle was now a revelation. Rebecca's eyes widened, her composure slipping with every second. She had wanted to shine, but she now stood in the shadow of someone greater. Preston's pride shattered. His face flushed, red as the whispers grew louder, shifting from ridicule to admiration. Admiration not for his wife, but for the woman he had mocked. Tasha did not stop. She moved with power and grace, each step carrying the weight of years hidden away, each movement a story of pain, loss, and strength reborn. She was not just dancing, she was reclaiming her name, her dignity, her stage. The orchestra, moved by instinct, lifted their instruments. Strings rose softly, then swelled as if summoned by her presence. The music and Tasha became one, filling the ballroom with something so pure that even the coldest hearts felt it. When she leapt, the room gasped. When she spun, the room trembled. And when she landed in perfect stillness, arms lifted like wings, the ballroom erupted, cheers thundered, applause shook the walls. Guests stood to their feet, some crying, some shouting, all overcome by what they had seen. Andre stepped closer, his voice carrying above the roar. That, he said firmly, was not the performance of a maid. That was the performance of a legend. Tasha lowered her arms slowly, her eyes calm, her face steady. She had not danced for applause. She had danced for truth. Rebecca stood frozen, her pride crushed. Preston clenched his fists, his plan twisted against him. And Jason stared with awe, whispering what many now realized. The lost ballerina has returned. The ballroom was no longer a place of mockery. It had become a stage of revelation. But this turning point was only the beginning. Because in the glow of applause, behind the admiration and whispers, jealousy and rage began to stir, and the night was far from over. The thunder of applause was still echoing when silence cut back into the ballroom. Tasha stepped forward, her head high, her voice steady. She looked directly at Preston Wells, the man who had mocked her, the man who had turned her presence into a cruel game. "Tell them, Preston," Tasha said, her voice calm but sharp like glass. "Tell them why you dragged me into this room. Tell them what you wanted to prove." The crowd shifted uneasily. Eyes moved between Preston's flushed face and Tasha's calm strength. Preston tried to laugh, but the sound cracked. "You are just a maid who got lucky. Do not pretend you belong here." But before his words could spread, Jason Mendez stepped forward. His phone was in his hand, his voice clear. "I recorded everything," Jason said firmly. "Every insult, every cruel word, every scheme to humiliate her. The world will know the truth." Gasps rose. Phones lit up across the room as Jason sent the recordings live. Within seconds, notifications buzzed. Social media ignited. Screens glowed with Preston's words, with Rebecca's laughter, with the cruelty that had poisoned the evening. The guests who had once cheered Rebecca now turned their eyes with shame. They whispered, not about Tasha, but about Preston's arrogance, about the cruelty of power used to wound. Preston's face turned pale. "You would dare," he began. But his voice faltered against the tide of judgment rising around him. And then Andre stepped forward. Calm, tall, his presence commanding. He faced his father, the man whose pride had driven the night into chaos. "Father," Andre said firmly, "you wanted to break her. You wanted to remind everyone of your power. But all you have done is expose your weakness." His words landed heavy. The room froze, stunned at a son daring to challenge his father in public. Andre's voice did not shake. "I will not stand beside arrogance. I will not defend cruelty. Tonight I stand with justice." Whispers rippled like waves, voices stunned and amazed. A son had rejected his father, choosing truth over blood. Rebecca's facade began to crumble. Her painted smile was gone, her poise shattered. She stared at Tasha as if seeing her for the first time, her lips trembling. For years, Rebecca had thrived on elegance and control. But now she looked small, shaken, exposed. Tasha's eyes locked on hers. "You wanted me to bow," she said, her voice steady. "But tonight I rise." Rebecca lowered her gaze, unable to answer. The weight of truth filled the ballroom. Social media burned outside those walls, carrying the story to thousands, soon to millions. Screens across the city now showed the rise of Tasha Brooks, the fall of Preston Wells, and the crack in Rebecca's perfect mask. The balance had shifted. The power was no longer in the hands of those who mocked. It had returned to the woman who had once disappeared. But in the shadows of pride and shame, another storm was preparing to break. The night was not yet finished. The story of the gala spread like wildfire. By morning, news outlets carried Preston Wells' humiliation. The once celebrated businessman was now the face of arrogance and cruelty. His empire shook as investors withdrew support, contracts were cancelled, and partners distanced themselves. Within weeks, the Wells name, once a symbol of wealth, became a warning of pride, turned to ruin. Preston sat in silence, his empire crumbling around him. The power he once used to belittle others was gone. His reputation could not be repaired. For the first time, he was forced to face life without control, without applause, without the shield of money. Rebecca, once a figure of elegance, disappeared from the public eye. She could not bear the shame of being part of Preston's schemes. Her mask of perfection had cracked, and behind it was only fear. Her name no longer inspired admiration, but pity. The friends who had once praised her elegance turned their backs. Amid the fall of the Wells family, Andre rose, calm, steady, and, guided by values his father had long abandoned, he stepped forward to rebuild what was left. Andre did not use cruelty. He did not use fear. He chose honesty, integrity, and respect. The same guests who once bowed to Preston now found new hope in Andre's leadership. The son had become the man his father could not be. But the greatest light of all came from Tasha Brooks. With the support she received, she opened the Tasha Brooks Arts Center. It was not just a building. It was a place where children of every background could dance, paint, sing, and discover the beauty of expression. Every wall of the center held a story. Photos of young dancers lined the hallways. Quotes about dignity and hope covered the rooms. And at the very entrance, a plaque read, "To those who are told they do not belong, this place proves you do." Tasha taught with patience and kindness. She encouraged every child to believe that talent had no boundaries. Her story became an inspiration, a reminder that dignity could not be taken away, only hidden, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Jason's recording played a powerful role. His bravery in exposing the truth ensured that Tasha's story reached beyond the ballroom. It was shared across the world, reminding millions of the strength of standing up for what is right. Journalists praised his courage, while communities honored Tasha for her resilience. Together, their actions reshaped how people thought about respect, power, and humanity. Years later, Tasha would stand before a crowd, not in a ballroom filled with mockery, but in an auditorium filled with hope. The cheers she heard were not from those who doubted her, but from children who looked up to her as a guide, a protector, and a legend. And as her eyes filled with tears, she remembered the night that changed everything. The night when arrogance tried to silence her, but truth lifted her higher than ever before. The screen fades to black as the narrator's voice rises. True nobility is not found in titles or wealth. It is found in dignity. It is found in respect. It is found in humanity, and those who carry these values will never be forgotten.